Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Tabannusi, which is a board game designed by Daniele Tascini and David Spada in 2021. This one accommodates 1 to 4 players and takes around 2 hours to play. Now, if you're relatively involved in the board game hobby, you might be aware that every year Board and Dice publish a new game of the T series. So this is the latest version of that at the time of this recording anyway. And as you'd probably imagine, this is a pretty heavy and involved Euro involving dice. But before I get into how the game actually plays, I need to give a shout out to keyender.co.uk who sponsored the show. So if you live in the UK and you regularly buy board games, be sure to check out their great website. But let's take a look at Tabannusi. So a game of Tabannusi is going to look a bit like this once it's completed. So I've just played a 3-player game here, and this board is actually double-sided. So on one side you've got the 1 and 2 player board, which is obviously a bit tighter, and the 3 to 4 player board is going to look like this. However, again, a lot has been developed here, so it's not going to look quite like this at the start of the game. So essentially the game is divided into 5 different areas or different zones. You've got these 3 general zones here, which work in the exact same way, which we'll talk about a bit later. You've got this little ziggurat section here, which you can invest in different bonuses at the end of the game and how you can score different things and different criteria. You've got the standard Euro tracks here, which you're trying to climb and increase your multipliers. And you've got this little section of the board down here to the bottom right, where you are investing in player powers and can get scoring in different ways. Additionally, each player is going to have their own player area, where you're going to have your own board here, which is going to show where all your houses start at the beginning of the game. And as you place more houses onto the board, you can start unlocking these different bonuses. You can also carry these other resources here, which basically proxy dice that you can acquire throughout the game. And in this game, as you'd expect with a lot of Daniele Tascini designs, dice are your resources. But let's talk about how the game actually plays. I'll try to be as brief as I can because there's a lot going on here. So a game of Tabannusi is going to consist of 5 scoring phases, and then there's going to be a final scoring. And I suppose the core mechanism of the game is dice drafting. So what you're going to do is on your turn, you are going to start anyone on the board as a first off, and then you can take one of the dice available on these boats here. So you can see that all these different areas correspond to a different colour dice. So you've got these ones here, you've got the yellow ones that correspond to this area, and so on. And what you're going to do before you do anything is you're going to draft one of those die from the pool. So let's just say I took this one here, and again, the yellow die is going to be a particular type of resource. And when you go there, when you take that particular value, that is going to mean that you're going to have to go to that area next time. So if you remember, let's say the blue player took that 1, that means they're going to have to move their little servant here to the 1 area, which means that next turn they have to go to the 1 area. And that's all the significance of that pit value. So in a lot of Tascini games, you are, using this pit values for different things, but in this one, it's purely to show which area you are forced to go to next. Now, you can mitigate that by using gold, which means you can go anywhere you want, but as a general rule, that is what you're going to do. And from after that, you are going to take up to 2 actions of your choice corresponding to the region you're in. So most of these areas are the same, but they do have one of these modular actions which can be mixed up from game to game to show a bit of variety, and they're going to do different things such as giving you points, giving you claim markers, and claim markers are a big part of the game because it's going to show your control of different things throughout the game, and if you don't have them in your supply, then you can't actually increase your influence on the board. So it's quite important to have an income of those claim markers. You can do different things like in this area, such as claiming these water tiles and grass tiles, which can increase and multiply your scoring. And this one here lets you kind of lose points to climb tracks. And this one here just gives you gold and more claim markers. And gold is a wild resource in this game, so it's very useful. But let's talk about what you're actually trying to do and how you're going to gain victory points. So one of the main actions is to lay these plans down, and they're going to come in 3 different colours, the brown, the yellow and the white, and that is going to correspond to the track up here. So there's kind of 3 main colours that you're trying to climb up. And what you're going to do is when you're in that particular area, so let's just say again the yellow player took a plan action because he's in the 1 area, so he's going to have to build in the 1. That is a restriction, so you can only ever kind of interact with the area where your main worker currently is. And let's just say he plays one of these yellow plans. Now when you play a plan, you are going to lay it on one of these tiles. Let's just say we played a 4-player game and can use this spot here. You are going to get any bonus that's beneath that plan. So this one's actually climb any track. This one gives you a gold. This one gives you a claim marker. That one lets you take a brown die from the ship there. and so on. And if there's ever an existing plan of that type there, you're going to have to spawn off from it. So you can't just spawn somewhere else. And then you're going to put your little marker on there to show that you developed that plan. And that's very important because this is a weird mechanism which actually encourages other players to build on your plans because they get to do it cheaper than if you were to build it yourself. So let's say the blue player wants to now build in this area. So first off, again, they're going to draft the die available. So they're going to take a 5 there, and the 5 is going to correspond to this area here. So they're going to place their servant over here just to show that they're going to go there next turn. And then they can carry on with their 2 actions if they wish to do so. So first off, let's say they want to build on this area here. So what that means is that they're going to have to spend a number of resources or local resources. So in this one, it's going to be this color here, in order to build a house on this region. So when they do that, they are going to, again, spend those 2 resources. Let's just say they spent this one here, and let's say they had a spare gold, because again, gold is wild, so that's their 2 local resources. And then they're going to put buildings on this plan area to show that it is going to be theirs. So it'd work like this. So basically these 2 are going to get replaced with these 2, like so. And anybody who's been displaced by doing so, again, the black player and the yellow player, is going to climb up that corresponding track. So again, these are the yellow tiles. So therefore the black player and the yellow player are going to go up that yellow track, which again is going to increase their multipliers when it comes to scoring. And then this blue player is going to claim those buildings as their own. And I suppose now is the best time to explain how this scoring actually works. So once one of these boats runs out of dice, you're going to score for that particular region. So let's just say this one got took here. Then you are going to have a look at all the different buildings here, and they're going to score. So let's say this yellow one here, so we've got a footprint of 2, so that's a 2-size building, and then you're going to multiply that by the space on the track. So the blue again had a 2-size building, they're up to this 2 area on this track here, which means they get 2 times 2 for 4 points. Now the gardens, which is another action you can take, is going to increase the footprint of that building by as many gardens as it's touching. So let's say here this brown building, again it's a 2-size brown building that the yellow controls here, but it's touching 1, 2, 3 gardens, which basically multiplies it up, or kind of increases its footprint by that many squares. So this is going to be a 5-size building. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The buildings plus the gardens it's touching. Again, and multiply it by the space on that brown track because it's a brown building. So that'll be 5 times 2 for 10 points. So gardens are really important to increase your multipliers and get you more points. However, if you do build a garden by spending green dice to collect the tiles, or blue dice to collect the water tiles, because gardens can only ever be built on water, and water has to spawn from where water or gardens already are. And then you're going to build on top of them. Again, if there's a bonus on them, then you can claim the bonus. But if somebody builds a building after you've built that garden connected to it, so let's say someone builds a building here, then any person with a garden around it is going to get to climb a track of their choice. Now you can actually build on your own plans, however doing so is going to be more expensive for the person doing so. So let's have a look here. So normally, again, to build a building, you're going to have to spend 2 local resources, in this example, the two brown coloured dice. But then you're going to have to spend an additional cost of 1 matching die colour equal to the tiles you're built on. So again, this one here is going to cost this black player another white dice because it's a white plan to build that building. The number 4 area here is pretty simple, where you are either going to pay 2 gold in order to claim one of these technology tiles, and again put your disc on there, and they're going to let you do different things, such as you see the black player has invested in this technology, so whenever he builds a house he gets 2 points and all that kind of stuff. Additionally, you can spend 2 local resources, again the blue in this example, in order to build a house on these outskirts on the kind of dock here, and that's going to be another way to score points, because whenever all the dice are exhausted here, you're going to score this particular region, which is going to work in this kind of cross-hatching system, where wherever buildings you have on the vertical or horizontal axes, you're going to score a point for each one. So you can see here the yellow's got a building here, so it's going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points for that particular region. And whenever you get a whole line or a whole column, you can end up taking these bonus tiles, which can give you bonuses used throughout the game. But if you don't spend them, you get 3 points for each of those. Additionally, the ziggurat action works pretty simply, where you are spending 2 local resources in order to build one of your houses in these particular colours. So you've got the white area, the brown area, and the yellow area, and that is going to give you certain ways to score points at the end of the game, depending on a certain criteria. And again, you can see these are modular. So this one is going to get you 2, 3, or 4 points, depending on how many houses you have here, for each building you have on that dock area. So you can see here the black has invested, or the black player has invested two times in this particular region to get 3 points for each of their houses in the dock area. So therefore they'd only get 3 points there because they've only got 1 house there. But you can see how that might multiply the more you invest in it. And again, you've got these additional tiles here where you can flip those neutral ones over, or those ones you collect. Or this one here lets you place a worker anywhere and take 1 dice from the supply of dice that have already been spent. There are also a number of public objectives available to you, and the first player to claim them is going to get a boost of points. So this one, for example, says, the first player to get 8 garden tiles down on the board is going to score 10 points and take one of those bonus harbour tiles. And so you can see here that the yellow players have got that achieved by getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these gardens on the board. So therefore, on their turn as a free action, they could claim that card and score that many points in that bonus. And you can see some of these objectives are quite a bit different, where this one requires 3 yellow buildings on the board, plus 2 of these orange coloured technologies, and 2 of these darker coloured technologies as well. Not only are the tracks important to increase your multipliers of your coverage on the board, but also the lowest marker you have on a certain track, when you get to these certain checkpoints, you're going to get bonuses such as getting more of these control markers, gold, points, etc. And if you ever hit these spots here, again, you're going to get those bonuses too. And again, once 5 of those ships have been exhausted, you're going to play another round, and then every single region is going to score again. And then, of course, the person with the most points is going to be the winner. I think that's all I really want to cover about the rules. There is a few more things that I could have talked about, but I think you probably got the gist of how it works, and without going into too much detail. But let's talk about my thoughts on Tabannusi. Okay, so out of all of the tea games, I must say this one is probably the easiest to learn, but maybe the more difficult one to understand, because there's quite some obtuse things going on here that don't quite fit into place when you play this for the first few times. Particularly with the way that everything interacts with each other, because I do think the designers here have really tried to embed interaction into everything you do and try to make that part of the game shine, because again, whatever you do in the game, you are one way or another impacting or luring another player into taking a particular action. Particularly with this planning thing, you're planning a certain region, hopefully getting the great reward at the bottom, because that's really rewarding for you to do so. But doing that is going to create an opportunity for other players, because when they build on your plans, they get to do it for cheaper. And additionally, you get rewarded by climbing up the corresponding track. So this weird back and forth interaction is quite difficult to wrap your head around, and it's hard to, at least for me, to understand who's getting the net gain out of that. And I think that's probably where the game does shine, but I think, again, that's not going to really shine through, or not really going to become as transparent as you might want it to. And I think it's quite a brain burner to try and min-max that. Additionally, I think out of all the dice drafting mechanisms, or all the dice games that Tascini has made, this one is probably the most cut back one, the most simple one, where you're simply taking it for the resources, which is purely the colour of the dice, and the only reason the pit value matters is to lay the foundation of where you're going to go next time. Now, I'm not saying that's not important or significant, because of course, if you want to go a particular region, then you're going to have to make sure that dice is there. And the 6, when you do get a 6 in the pool, it does mean that you can take any of the unavailable actions. So you do have some good flexibility, but sometimes you can find yourself a bit pigeonholed and not being able to go where you want to go. And every second in this game is important, because before you know it, these pools of these boats and the dice are going to get exhausted, and that's going to automatically trigger a scoring when you might not want it to, because you might have the foundations there, but you haven't got your building down yet, or you haven't quite climbed the track yet to get those big multipliers. So yeah, I like the timing of this game, and I like the fact that there is no real round structure. You just keep playing and score only when those boats are exhausted, and that really makes the game tick along nicely. It makes it flow well. And again, it keeps players on their toes. Additionally, I like the fact that when the regions do score, then you have to put back any coloured dice of that colour back into the pool to be re-rolled and distributed again. And that means that you've potentially wasted your draft, but you do get compensated by climbing the track of the relevant colour. So there is a little bit of give there, just a little bit of forgiving. But generally, the resource gathering, the resource management is very tight. It's hard to get anything done in this game, and you really do rely on those wild resources, that gold. And I think that's probably one of my main issues with the game. I do think that the use of gold was a bit too much of a crutch, and it really did kind of take away a lot from the resource management. You know, it gives you a lot of options to get gold, and I found probably 80% of the time, whenever I was spending dice, I would always spend one of the matching colour that I needed, and then probably a gold to accompany that. And again, that kind of watered it down a bit for me, and it felt a bit, I don't know, it just felt like it softened the blow, and it didn't feel quite as satisfying as I would have liked. Generally, I like the way that the scoring works. You know, your footprint on the board multiplied by your point on the track. That works really well for me, and it does feel very satisfying when you end up building a nice big footprint of a building. At the same time, you're laying foundations for other players so that you're climbing up the relevant tracks as well, because you know you do have to keep those plates very kind of evenly balanced, so you know you're not having a massive footprint but you're multiplying it by next to nothing, or vice versa. So that works quite well, and again it keeps you on your toes and keeps you trying to nudge up all the tracks, not only for that reason but because you're going to get the bonuses on the side as well. The whole garden and water mechanism I think is okay. I'm not enthralled by it. I do quite like the fact that, you know, when you build these gardens, they're going to be a massive help because they do massively multiply your footprint of the building. And if you lay them down, you're going to invite people to build next to them because, again, it's going to increase their scoring, but you're going to get to climb a track of your choice. Additionally, I like the fact that you have to commit one of these player markers on them, and these are, you know, they're a finite resource. So doing so is going to really limit your options later in the game because you've got all your things committed on the board. So you do have to decide, you know, to balance and use those discs as well as you can and balance them and keep a regular supply in. So I think that's a really cool mechanism, actually. The fact that you do have to make sure that you're constantly getting these influence markers into your pool to put them on the board or leave yourself without many options. So I thought that the little duck area down here was somewhat underwhelming. Now, this system is used in Tabannusi, you know, when you've got this kind of cross-hatching mechanism. And, you know, I thought this was it felt a bit tacked on. Additionally, I thought that the technologies weren't too interesting. So just to contrast with a game like Teotihuacan, I always felt like every single technology in Teotihuacan, like I needed to have, they're all fantastic. This one, it was like, yeah, big whip. I'm not too fussed on what they do. You know, for example, you know, this one here, when you build a garden, you just take one of the control markers from the general supply rather than your own personal pool. So it's like, it's fine, it's worth having, but is it really worth the additional investment, you know, 2 gold to get that done? Now, something I didn't mention is when you do build a building, you do actually get to take one of these technologies if you spend 1 gold, as long as it matches the footprint of the building, which I think is fine. It certainly gets things fast-tracked and it's more inviting to do that. But again, I just didn't think this felt too strong. And additionally, the amount of points you get from doing so just felt small, and you don't really find people really going down here too often and trying to really sink their teeth into this particular strategy because it doesn't feel as strong as the other parts of the game. Now, I do like these tokens that you can get and add them to your board, because again, these are just kind of proxy dice that you could have drafted, and there is a particular region over here that lets you refresh them and exploit that to keep using those dice again and again. And I thought that was a really cool thing, and that's probably one of my favourite parts of the game, actually. Similarly to the dock area, I think the Zeppelin area is, again, a bit weak. It didn't feel very exciting for me. Now, yeah, sometimes it is more inviting, you know, when you spend these resources and you get some of these great bonuses, such as climbing the tracks. But I just felt like the investment you put in was quite small. You know, get 1 point for each technology you have, or, you know, potentially 2 or 3 if you go there again and again. But I just never really felt the urge to do that. I think maybe one of the main reasons this one comes into play a bit more is when there is some kind of public objective that works off that. You know, like this one, for example, says, you know, get all of the different colours of the ziggurats in there. And one of each coloured buildings, and you can get this big injection of points, which is, again, a bit more satisfying when you pull that off. But to actually tailor your strategy to one of these, I don't think it's really going to happen that often. I think the uptime and general time investment of Tabannusi is generally good. It certainly does feel like it ticks along nicely and you're kept on the edge of your seat as the game goes on. Because, again, the time does really kind of go down the drain as the game goes on. You feel like, I'm running out of time, I still need to get a building down here, I still need to climb into the next bracket on the track, I still need enough time to get that objective done. So yeah, it does feel like you are constantly moving on to the next thing and trying to spin those plates and get everything you've done within quite a tight amount of time. To go back to this round structure, I think that's really well done. I love the fact that there is no real housekeeping, there is no meticulous phase orders or anything like that. Just keep playing, and when a scoring happens, it happens, like it or not. So that, for me, is a real change of pace in the kind of flow of these Tascini games, and I thought it was a welcome addition, and I'd like to see that used again. The replayability of Tabannusi is a bit of a strange one. Yeah, there's the traditional Tascini modularity. You're moving these different actions around each game. Each game you've got different ziggurat tiles, you've got different technology tiles that come out, so again, lots of variability that way, objectives, etc. So there is some good modularity. However, I would say that you're probably going to get the most out of this game if you have the same group who enjoy it to play it again and again with, to start understand or wrap your head around that obtuse and weird interaction. Because I think if somebody's played this game and you're constantly introducing it to newer players, then I think that player might have a distinct advantage on how the game works and how it operates. Yeah, as you've probably understood from the explanation so far, interaction is a big part of this game. Not to mention, again, the laying the plans down, building on the plans, going up tracks, using your own tiles, using other people's tiles, all have their own bonuses and positives and negatives. There's also additional interaction in terms of the race for the objectives. There's the additional interaction in terms of triggering the scoring, because if a person's going to a region, you have a bunch of these resources, you don't want that region to score yet. That's something you're going to have to bear in mind and going to have to overcome. So yeah, as people are doing their own thing in this game, you are constantly going to be standing on each other's toes. Are you going to be helping people by building gardens? Are you going to get more of it by climbing tracks? So yeah, all of it is, interaction is generally embedded and injected into the very DNA of the game. The production and artwork of the game I'm generally happy with. I love the way the board looks. I generally, Board and Dice do wonderful productions. I do like the way the buildings look. They do kind of connect to each other and things, which can be a bit annoying at times because they have these little lips on. But no real issue there. And one of the things I was slightly disappointed on was that the houses are these kind of cheap, almost like Lego pieces. They're plastic, so it would have been nice if they were wood, but I understand wood's expensive at the moment, so maybe that's the reason. But I generally like the way that the game develops and it kind of evolves as the game goes on, starts to come alive and has a nice table presence. So yeah, no real issues there. Some of the symbology on the game wasn't the best, particularly when it came to the technology tiles. I did find myself looking at the rulebook again and again to see what some of these did, because it's not overtly obvious on what they do. And sometimes when you think it means something, it might mean something else. So I don't think the symbology is the best. It's not the worst by any means. Okay, so let's go straight into my final thoughts. So if you're a regular fan of my show or watch my content regularly, you might be aware that these T-series of games are amongst my very favourite of all time. And of course, in order to keep this series going, the designers are going to have to try new things, new ways they can use dice, new things they can do, and just general try new mechanisms. And when that happens, you normally find designers reaching further and further to find new things in order just to be different and to stand out from amongst the pack. Now, I'm not sure on this occasion that paid off. Now, I understand that they've tried to embed more interaction into the game. And again, as I said earlier, try to make the interaction the very DNA of what this game is all about. And for me, I think they've reached so far to the point that it's so obtuse that it almost takes away from the fun, and it has this jarring and grinding feel to it where it's just so unintuitive that it doesn't quite make sense. Now, I don't want that to sound overly negative, because I do like it when designers try new things, and I'm not saying by any means this is a bad game. No, this is made by probably the best designer in the business at the moment, or one of the best, Daniele Tascini. He's a genius. He's brilliant at what he does. And I do like this dice drafting system. Just take the resource and go to there next time. Simple as that. Not as complicated as games like Trismegistus or anything like that. Very simple. But the way that the players interact with each other, I'm not sure if it paid off for me personally. And I know that did rub off on all the other players I played with as well. And this is going to require quite a niche group to get the most out of it. And I'm not sure if I have that niche group. And this is completely alien speak for me. No, these games are almost always a banker for me to enjoy. Always my most anticipated game of the year. And on this occasion, I don't think that is the case, sadly. So I think this is quite clearly my least favourite game of the T-series. I think this part of the game was lackluster. Didn't really enjoy it at all. Again, some symbology, very dodgy. This part as well, I didn't feel too strongly about. I thought the objectives were okay. I thought these personal objectives on these cards that I didn't talk about, these are too restrictive and don't really pay off. And yeah, as a general consensus, I felt like the game was just quite jarring, very difficult to wrap your head around. I mean, obtuse sometimes for the sake of being obtuse. And I think maybe the investment and that things falling into place, and that initial learning curve, aren't quite paid off in terms of the enjoyment and fun you get out of it. There are some things I really liked about it. Again, I like the way that the scoring works in the first place. The buildings multiplied by the tracks. That's really cool. I like the simple dice drafting system. That's perfectly cool. But other than that, I thought everything else was just a bit too jarring, a bit too convoluted, and just so unintuitive. So yeah, that is my final thoughts on Tabannusi. So very strange, not for me to be singing from the rooftops about one of these tea games. But I have to be honest, and that is my honest thoughts. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you found it useful or at least somewhat entertaining, then please hit like and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Additionally, if you wish to support the show, because I am a one-man operation and I don't get any support from publishers, then please consider backing it on Patreon at patreon.com/chairman of the board, where you can back for as little as £2 per month. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.